A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to some more TV shows that deserve the spotlight. So, why don't we go ahead and take a look back with some more Disney-related properties. After all, it's about time that I do get to talk about one show in particular that came out in the year 2000. Following in the success of the sequel to Toy Story known as Toy Story 2, Buzz Lightyear of Star Command would officially begin airing in summer of 2000. Several months after the box office and critical success of Toy Story 2 allowed the likes of Disney to eventually come to wonders in creating a supposed spin-off series intended for the world of Buzz Lightyear. After all, as spoken clearly in the first Toy Story film, Buzz Lightyear is a space ranger who fights for the Galactic Alliance against the evil Emperor Zurg. And well, there actually were ideas circulating around that supposedly there could have been ideas of Buzz Lightyear's own world being explored. And so, 5 years after the first film came out, there eventually was an official series dedicated to Buzz Lightyear's many adventures alongside his daily routine, his job as a space ranger to protect the galaxy from the likes of evil Emperor Zurg and his massive army of Zurg bots. So, of course, being that this was an idea that had been around for a long time now, it made sense they would eventually get around to it when they had the time and budget put together. In summer 2000, there came along Buzz Lightyear of Star Command episodes 1 through 3, as well as a movie which basically used the first episodes in and of itself as a means of being a multi-part pilot. So if you thought that The Incredible Hulk was interesting because it had 2 pilot episodes with 2 parts each, thereby making 4 total, known as Pilot and Death in the Family, Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, though, its triple-parter of a pilot, basically, used the likes of its own movie adaptation, which starred the likes of Tim Allen, Diedrich Bader, Wayne Knight, Adam Carolla, Nicole Sullivan, Stephen Furst, Larry Miller, and many others, to create a unique adventure that would set itself up for its own special series. Basically speaking, Buzz Lightyear Star Command: The Adventure begins, not just as the movie, but also as its own part within the series. It itself was a unique way to start off an epic series of adventures. And speaking of episodes, why don't we scroll through those real quick as well. So, you can basically see for yourself, they had quite a lot of things to piece together here. And there's a lot of material that I can basically cover up on. From the fact that, as mentioned before, there's quite a big cast. Lots of memorable actors were in there, from the likes of Tim Allen playing his own role as Buzz Lightyear in the movie. For some reason, they didn't have him do it in the series. Instead, it was taken up by Patrick Warburton. David Puddy himself is in this series. But we know that Warburton himself has also had a lot of roles. Like, for example, he plays Ken in B-Movie, Kronk in Emperor's New Groove, and we certainly can't forget Joe Swanson from Family Guy. So that's a lot of roles and quite a big resume if you ask me, but I'd say in this instance, Warburton playing Buzz Lightyear seemed like a nice substitute, but never will be as legendary as Tim Allen. Because if you can really expect Tim the Toolman Taylor or the Last Man Standing to be Buzz Lightyear and nothing more, I guess there probably wouldn't have been that big of a resume. But, I mean, Alan had to start somewhere at some point. Anyways, though, Warburton plays Buzz Lightyear himself, whereas his many cronies, or friends that are involved, basically, his partners with the Space Command itself, you have Mira Nova, who's played by Nicole Sullivan, a being who can basically enter at a molecular level. A process simply known as tangibility, where you can basically walk right through walls. She has that kind of power, and then there's a small robot, a bit of a defective piece of machinery, simply known as XR. He is voiced by the comedian Larry Miller, and then you basically have a large alien creature who used to work as a custodian for the Star Command itself. Booster, who's played by Stephen Furst. And you might remember him in Animal House, for instance, where he plays the character Flounder. And then, of course, the cast just keeps getting bigger and bigger. There's Nebula, commander of the Star Command, played by Adam Carolla. And then, of course, you have the LGMs, or Little Green Men, who they themselves have made appearances in Toy Story media left and right. These guys were also voiced by Patrick Warburton. So, it's a lot like other actors where they can have multiple roles in multiple ways possible. And if that's not enough, why don't we talk a bit about Dennis Nedry's own Wayne Knight, who voices the one and only evil Emperor Zurg. But he also played Al McWiggins, one of the main antagonists from Toy Story 2. A toy collector who's eager to take Woody and the Roundup gang over to Japan to be sold at the Kanishi Toy Museum, which of course fails. And by the end of the movie, we get to see his reaction to it. So of course, that's pretty nice that Wayne Knight was able to move on from Toy Story to Toy Story, basically. I mean, what's next? Are we going to have a prequel to Jurassic Park where Dennis Nedry's childhood is explored? I feel like I'm getting a little too deep into that part, though. So, that's basically the casting of itself, but when you get down to it, there's other actors in there as well. You have the likes of Diedrich Bader as former Star Command member Warp, who basically is actually a double agent working for Zurg, and basically becomes part of the Star Command just so he can get in as deep as possible to Buzz Lightyear himself. And as we saw in the movie, he supposedly lets himself get killed by an explosion, but he actually survives and becomes the secret assassin known as Agent Z. And then there's other characters as well. Other actors like Brad Garrett, Jeff Bennett, and even guest voices like Mark Hamill, for instance. So, you think there's enough amazing actors in there so far? Well, I could go even deeper into that, but that's just one particular subject about what makes the show so great. How about the many plot lines? Like, we have the explorations on the many origins that related to how all the characters got together with Buzz Lightyear and worked in the Star Command alongside him. Like, we got Mira Nova's side of the story, Booster's side, and XR's side, and everybody else pretty much. Then we also get to a point where there's basically a thief known by the name of Shiv Katal, who has basically been working alongside Zurg, but mostly as his own double agent. And it just so happens that Shiv Katal's true identity is the one and only Commander Nebula himself. Yeah, that's pretty amazing, you know? In addition to portraying himself as a thief, pretending to be an ally of Zurg as a means of getting close and releasing prisoners, how about we also talk a bit about the moment where Buzz Lightyear tries computer-selected dating systems and getting together with a fiancé of his. I mean, that itself is pretty flattering and almost a means to break the line of reality and fiction. So, I mean, that itself is pretty funny. But otherwise, there's just a lot of other things I could cover here. And I could probably be here for hours explaining all that stuff. However, one amazing detail that I might as well save for last is the song to infinity and beyond. This was one particular instance where the movie, especially in the credits sequence that takes place, I could never basically shut off the VHS after finishing watching the movie, because in the credits, I recalled back in the day that the voice sounded very familiar. It wasn't until many years later that I found out that it was in fact James Kirk from Star Trek. Yes, Captain Kirk's own William Shatner was singing the songs to infinity and beyond. So Star Trek is now getting involved with Toy Story? That's amazing. I had no idea that it was actually Shatner in the credit sequence of Buzz Lightyear Star Command, The Adventure Begins. Like, it is unbelievable how that basically all went down. But you know what though? I feel like what I could do is I could save the movie for the next time I do films I'm willing to talk about again, which will be coming soon, so I probably won't want to spoil anything for you. Other than that though, you know, the song itself is basically in the ways, like if you thought that the likes of Yo Joe or Transform and Roll Out, those were quotes that have been repeated over and over again, famous catchphrases, well, much like how the movies were, the Toy Story universe translating into the Star Command universe, years later, To Infinity and Beyond has since become more than just a simple catchphrase. It's basically become a military-styled cadence in its own possible way. It's potentially become probably even more than that. Who really knows? But to say the least, Buzz Lightyear Star Command, though it did run for a bit of a short time, lasting less than a year, with over 20 episodes to watch, that doesn't really give us a whole lot to cover. But by the end of the series, when XR meets up with a specialized robot face, you know, all's well that ends well. And while reruns have come and gone, it's sad to say that the only real way to see the show anymore is by watching it on YouTube, where people were able to capture it, because even Disney Plus is unwilling to recreate the show in high quality, much like how it would have done with other shows, which is kind of weird. I mean, if they could basically remaster Phineas and Ferb or even some of their other shows in high quality and release it on a well-known platform for streaming purposes, then why not this? I guess we'll never know. So, I guess with all that covered, Buzz Lightyear Star Command is a great show, an interesting follow-up and spin-off to the likes of the Toy Story films. And because this series is still ongoing with the supposed 5th film planned next in the queue, I have a lot of high hopes, knowing that maybe it can not only get bigger, but it might even get better. Because Toy Story 4 was a huge success in the box office, as well as by critics. And I feel that number 5 can hopefully give us the same feeling. So, make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side if you'd like to see more material here in TV shows that deserve the spotlight.